Normally I have some super witty opening to give you guys, but there are truly no words for how much the Tar Heels let me down last night against Pittsburgh. I wish I could say something profound. I wish I could give you some sort of word of encouragement, but I got nothing. If you know that you only have one job and that's to not mess it up, and then you choose to do that anyway, it's got to be stressful for the kid. Let's talk about some men's hoops in the ACC from last night with Tyler Aki from Locked On Syracuse.
Locked On ACC, your daily podcast on the Atlantic Coast Conference. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on, everybody? Welcome to today's edition of Locked On ACC. Super excited to have you joining me and Tyler Aki, Candace Cooper here from the Locked On ACC podcast that you can find wherever you listen to podcasts. We appreciate you for making me and the team your first listen. That was so horribly grammatically incorrect, but it's fine. We're rolling. Tyler Aki, Locked On Syracuse. How are you feeling on this fine Thursday?
I'm great just because Syracuse hasn't played this week. Sometimes it's the little things like that. I mean, I could be you today. I could be coming off a Pitt. I've been you before, actually.
Okay.
Coming off a Pitt loss.
Okay.
I don't know if we need some sort of club or group that meets on Wednesdays or something to the Jeff Capel defeatist crowd or something like that. I don't know, but
my God, it can't get much worse.
There is no bigger gut punch in this conference than losing to Pitt. Like, some people would say it's BC. I think it's Pitt.
Absolutely.
Because BC has had some dudes over the past couple of years. I think back to the Kai Bowman, Jerome Robinson team. There's a lottery pick on that team.
Yeah.
And Pitt, I guess, had Cam Johnson for a little bit before he transferred out. So I just think Pitt's the biggest gut punch because that program, since Jamie Dixon has left, has done nothing.
Yeah.
It's been an embarrassment.
But clearly last night in Chapel Hill, and let's, set the scene, right? In Chapel Hill, Carolina has only lost one game at home. It's the one at Duke where they got, smacked. Mm-hmm. They had been 14-0 before that. And then they decided, let's play another one. They played Florida State. They did well. But mind you, Florida State didn't have some of their key players, and we were just seeing, of course, the remnants of that. We thought, this North Carolina team is back. They're doing big things. They're on a roll. And then there was Pitt. Pitt came in and shot the lights out the gym. Man, Ithiel Horton, golly, 19 points on the day. Mr. Hughley had 18 points on the night. And I think the biggest thing for me was, if you are a believer in Armando Bacot being an ACC Player of the Year, I need you to be quiet now. There's no longer that conversation. I need you to stop, because I don't know what it is about him, but whenever he has to play someone who matches his skill set or is a little bit better, he gets the quiet. Now, mind you, he had a good game. No, he didn't. I'm not even going to hold you. 7 points. You're supposed to be the leader of this team, and you were held to 7 points. That's very telling. I don't care what anybody says. I know we talk about, how good or bad, whatever, double doubles. You can get double, triple, single whoppers. I don't care. If you can't step up in big moments, I don't feel like you're the Player of the Year for me. How do you feel, Tyler? Before I keep going off.
I almost want to hear you keep going, but if you'll allow me to intervene, I will. You know what's weird with Carolina is that in these letdown games that they have, who's been their best player in all those games? I think you'd agree with me too. It's been Brady Manick. Brady was rock solid in this game. That Duke game, Brady was the only one that showed up to play. And
he's a transfer, and that's the biggest part. He's He's not even all you talk about Carolina family and being ingrained in that. He's new to that.
Exactly. And I don't know what it is. If I'm a fan of any team, I think the most frustrating ride this season, some people might say Virginia Tech, some people might say Louisville, obviously, but I think the most frustrated fan base right now has to be Carolina.
Yeah.
Because of the way that they have toyed with emotions this entire season. Louisville, you could see after a couple of games, this thing was going in the can. Virginia Tech, you could see after a couple of games, there was a long losing streak in there. But Carolina, and it's weird to say about a team that's 10-5 in a conference right now, but they don't play close games. They don't. Everything is double digits, for better or for worse, pretty much. And you see games where they go out there and they look like the world beaters. I mean, they kick the ever-living you-know-what out of a lot of teams this year. But they have also had the same thing happen to them a number of times. When you look at, like, this Pitt game was a 9-point game. This wasn't a 9-point game.
No.
This felt like 15, 20 points pretty much.
Yeah.
Duke wasn't even close. Wake wasn't even close. Miami, another blowout. Kentucky earlier this year, a blowout. Tennessee, you got crushed in a neutral site. Like, there's just so many demoralizing losses on this team's resume right now that it pretty much cancels out a lot of the wins and goodwill that they've built up. And speaking of the wins, I mean, look at the wins that they have this year too. When you talk about top 40 Ken Pom wins, it's a Virginia Tech team that has been very disappointing, and it's a Michigan team that might be the biggest disappointment in the entire country.
Yep.
So where are you on North Carolina as a team? It's tough to gauge right now.
Speak on it, Tyler. The fact that the Pitt Panthers had 21-point lead against the Heels is very telling of just the emotional investment that team is either lacking or the want to and the drive that, like, there's no way in the world this Pitt team should be 21 points ahead of you. No, too much talent on that. Too much talent on that end.
Pitt should not be 21 points ahead of anybody in the ACC.
No. Absolutely not. And so you looking at an 11-16 team, 10-16 at the time, team that has struggled throughout the season. They have struggled with players being available, not available. And then Carolina has dealt with that. Dawson Garcia is officially out, right? Cool, whatever. Justin McCoy, he was out for the game. Fine, whatever. It's going to be a lot on Armando. Hello, pressure. You want the pressure? You got it. To not have Anthony Harris, who brings the energy, is very telling because of his academic issues, very stressful. Now, as much as we talk about the players, at what point, as much as I hate going against coaches, especially ones who look like mine, Hubert, my dog, what we doing? What we doing? Like, I understand there's a shift between a Hall of Fame coach and Hubert Davis, but golly.
You would expect a guy who learned under the wings of a Hall of Famer to at least have a lot of the Hall of Fame traits, right? Yeah. At least accumulate them for as long as he was on the staff under Roy Williams, and to be tabbed the successor as quickly as he was too. You'd expect that there would be some more of those Hall of Fame traits, and then you can branch off and create your own legacy at the same time. But I think the problem with this Carolina team right now is there is zero depth to it. When you talk about the loss of Garcia, but I don't even think that's the end of it there either. Like, Dawson Garcia, don't get me wrong, that's a big loss. But even if he was there, it's not like he's going to make a 20-point difference in a lot of these blowouts. He's just not. No player is, really. But, and that's the troubling part is, okay, maybe he makes some of these blowouts like 10, 8-point games, but they're still going to go down as losses. There's no one outside of Kerwin Walton or Dawson Garcia that really deserve minutes on this team right now.
Yeah, I honestly don't know the answer. And that's the biggest takeaway for me is, what is the answer? Because I feel like you can't teach heart. You can't teach want to. You can't teach desire. And if you look at this backcourt, I understand they want to be, walking and talking and having the swagger of being a North Carolina player, but there's a lot that comes to it. There is a high level of expectation, and I understand that there is pressure, but you have to deliver consistently. It's not about delivering when you feel like it. You have to deliver consistently, or you're going to find yourself at the NIT. So I've made peace with the fact I'm going to start looking up. I have no idea when the NIT starts. I don't know nothing about the NIT, but I'm going to look it up, Tyler. I'm going to look it up because I'm going to have to know, because that's where my team is going.
There's nothing more deflating. And I might meet you there too, by the way, in the NIT with Syracuse. But here's another thing with Carolina. I'm wondering too, as we're talking this through, and you talk about the heart and the want to, I almost wonder if it would be a good thing for the Carolina brand to slip a little bit. Maybe. Get a little bit more of the dogs, the feisty players who want to, quote unquote, bring Carolina back. Because at the end of the day, I don't know if the Carolina brand will ever slip. I mean, you talk about the legends that have gone through the program. The greatest player of all time has gone through the program. Like, that stuff matters. And you've got a rabid fan base too that I don't think will ever let it. A fantastic arena as well. A great atmosphere for watching a basketball game. So I don't know if it ever will slip. And I mean, the best uniforms, not just in college basketball, but in all of sports, might I add too. But, and just the perks that come with being a Carolina player. But if the brand were to slip a little bit, and maybe they start getting some of these guys who are the overachieving 4 stars, or like the hungry 5 stars that maybe were left off of a McDonald's All-American and feel like they still have a chip on their shoulder and something to prove, that might be good for the Carolina brand as a whole, as opposed to you walk in puffy chested because I'm a 5-star McDonald's All-American, all everything. that is now playing for Carolina, the same program that Michael Jordan went through, that Vince Carter went through, that all these different guys went through, Phil Ford, all these guys. Like, what? I think you understand where I'm coming from. I don't know if we'll ever get to that point, though.
Yeah, we have to. At the fact that we have to do this on Michael Jordan's birthday, it's really disappointing
That
for
is
me.
true,
Like,
yeah.
we let the squad. Maybe he has to come to every game because that's when the boys decide to show out. It's just very frustrating that you have 28% shooting on the night, and yes, not every shot goes in, and you do have off nights. But the same way we talk about Duke and how you're gonna get everyone's best when you play Duke Blue Devils. Carolina, why don't they feel the same way? Like, do you not understand that these guys would love nothing more than to go into Chapel Hill and beat you in the Dean Dome? Why don't you feel any sort of like we need to defend home? Like, we need to have some swag about it. Like, what is missing? And I think that's the biggest piece for me that I don't get.
I wonder if it's, and it's not Hubert's fault, but I wonder if the new coach just having that sort of feel to your program right now opens up a sense of vulnerability to your team. Like, we've got an excuse. We've got a built-in excuse now. So we don't, it feels a little vulnerable. Like, okay, we lost, new coach, still figuring out coach's system. Things are different around here. We lost a Hall of Famer. Like, that, we can't overlook that as well.
Yeah.
I'm wondering if that's part of it too. And it's not Hubert's fault. Give him a couple years. Maybe he figures it out. But the early return, like Hubert needs to succeed. He needs to, because this should be a succession plan, not a I can't even think of the right way to put it, but it should be a succession plan as opposed to this was a forced hire. Like, that's what it needs to be.
That's what it feels like, right? It feels like this is who Roy wanted, so this is what we're going to do. We're going to give him a year or two. We're going to understand that the program's going downhill, and we are going to move on quickly. But I want to ask you a question before I get here and talk about BetOnline. I want to ask you a question because you're probably going to be in this same sort of pot sooner or later. We had conversation on YouTube about who might be the successor. So I want to ask you this, but first, guys, if you are interested in betting, please make sure that you hit up betonline.net. Head to the website or use their mobile device today to learn more about the trends in action. BetOnline is simply where the game starts, from the latest odds, totals, player performance props to where the next fired coach is going to land. BetOnline.net is your number one spot for all of your sporting needs. And it's not just basketball. BetOnline.net is your source for hockey, boxing, and UFC odds, right to the Olympic coverage and information. So again, go to betonline.net. So we're here with Tyler Aki from Locked On Syracuse. And of course, we talked about this Carolina Pitt game. Carolina getting whooped 76-67 by the Panthers. And it was worse than that. They chipped away, but it's like, you can chip, but you also have to stop. Two things. I know it's crazy, but you have to make some defensive plays.
I'm looking
in order
right now
to get back in the game.
Final 10 minutes. Carolina outscored Pitt 33-21. And that's the only reason it looks as close as it is.
Yeah.
Right? That's the only reason. Yeah.
For sure. The fact that I was texting some of my friends and we said they had to get in below 9 to even feel like this was a game, and that wasn't the case, is why we lost. I went to bed. I ain't gonna lie to you. I said, I already know what's happening. I'm not watching this. I'm not going to bed angry. So there's that. But what I want to ask you is, you see what's going on with Hubert Davis. Syracuse is not far. Boeheim got to retire at some point. He has to leave, like whether it's going to be wheelchaired out or whatever, what have you. Are you guys, how does the administration have some sort of real succession plan and not just who Boeheim wants? Because it's clear that they've had some tension in terms of Boeheim playing certain players that people feel like, oh, he's only playing them because they might be related or XYZ, what have you. What do you feel like the real succession plan is going to look like for Syracuse?
I think that, well, you talk about like the favoritism maybe in players and family stuff. Well, to make the coaching analogy here, but everyone on the staff and really that's in contention for the Syracuse job is a quote unquote family member, because they all played for Boeheim. All right. So that is like they are all quote unquote his basketball sons, if you will. But I would say that when you look at the succession plan at Syracuse, I think it's going to go very similarly to what happened at Duke and Carolina. And I know there's all this stuff coming out this week about Coach K and Tommy Amaker and how that whole thing went down. But I think it's going to be effectively Jim Boeheim's pick. And it just needs to be signed off on by the university. And the university is going to sign off on whoever Boeheim picks, because it's really going to be a crop of 2-3 names that he's looking at. It's going to be Red Autry, one of the assistant coaches right now, Jerry McNamara, one of the assistant coaches right now, or I could see it being Mike Hopkins, who right now is the head coach at Washington, probably going to get fired in the next year or two. But he was tabbed as the Boeheim successor back when there was an initial plan to replace Boeheim after, I believe it was the 2017 season. So after that season, it was supposed to happen, but instead Hopkins went out, took the Washington job a year early, and that's kind of where everything fell. And Boeheim signed an extension to remain on as the head coach for a while. And obviously we are where we are right now, where he's still the head coach and doesn't show any signs of wanting to walk away anytime soon. So
yeah,
I think with Syracuse, it's going to go similarly. And I think it would mirror more towards the Coach K, where Boeheim has said he wants to announce the plan ahead because it'll help recruiting. It'll make sure that the foundation's there and make sure that players are in the loop.
he wants a farewell tour. It's okay. Just say what it is. No, I'm just kidding.
I mean, well, I will say this. I don't think he wants the farewell tour, but I think he wants because like he's not the attention guy this, attention guy that. He's not Coach K. Like he's not that. But I think he wants it for the health of the program, because Syracuse basketball, like, you got to remember, this is all he knows.
Yeah.
He's been a part of this program for over 50 years, whether it being a head coach, an assistant coach, or a player.
Yeah.
Coming up on, like, when it's all said and done, it'll probably be closer to 60, if not reaching 60 years.
Yeah.
So that, I mean, for effectively your entire life minus your teen years, that is impeccable. And what he has built, he does not want this thing to crumble. I think he cares so deeply about this university that he doesn't want to see this thing crumble. And I think the best way for him to do it would be to announce some sort of succession plan. That way the recruits stay and there's just everyone's in the loop that way. Because people are going to know with him when it's time. Like, if he were to hide it, people would, be able to tell when it's time. And he's always been the most transparent coach in all of America, whatever sport, like, for better or for worse, he's been the most transparent coach in all of America. So I'd expect it to be something a la Coach K, and the way that played out, from at least from the good parts of what's happened with Coach K.
Yeah, right. So I'm wondering though, like, when you think about Roy and Hubert, did he give the players some sort of hint or connection? Because you talk about recruiting, you talk about, who's going to stay or go. And I look at Walker Kessler having a good season at Auburn, and I know that Hubert tried to get him to stay, but I'm wondering if, maybe Walker knew, I ain't trying to deal with this. I don't want to deal with this mess. I don't want to deal with a rebuild, because as much as we want to give Hubert credit for being on the bench for 9 years as an assistant, there is nothing like being the head coach. There are more responsibilities. There's more kissing babies. There's a lot that goes on to it besides the X's and O's on the court, right? You don't have the same kind of, attention that you can give to your players one-on-one. So you have to have the right assistants available for you to make sure that happens. And sometimes I know we're crazy because we all want to be Batman, but it is cool to be Robin. Like, ain't nothing wrong with being a good number two. I think there's so many solid people who have built great careers on being good assistants. And I think that's been to me, one of the biggest mishaps, what I'm seeing right now with Carolina. I don't know if fresh eyes would have made the better sense, but because, ego-wise, having someone like Wes Miller come in, and you work under Wes Miller when you're older, you clearly have been around the program a little longer. Maybe that's just the ego thing. I don't know the answer. Absolutely not. All I say, sometimes being a Robin is cool.
A couple of college coaches have put it to me this way: when you go from being an assistant to being the head coach, you go from being the good cop to being the bad cop, because you start dictating players' minutes, assistant coaches' salaries, who's going on recruiting visits and when, and all that stuff. Like, you have final say. And when you're an assistant coach, if you've got a problem with the head coach as a player, you're going to the assistant coach, because they're going to be the sort of good cop and say, like, hey, like, you got this, like, more uplifting. Whereas the head coach, you got to be the bad guy at times. And that's the toughest part of making that transition, where Hubert's used to being the good cop, and now all of a sudden he's the bad guy at the top of the mountain. And that is such a tough transition for a lot of guys, especially for a guy like Hubert too, who by all accounts seems like the best dude in the world.
Yeah,
And I'm
probably sweet
sure,
as can be. Don't say a cuss word. He got all the
right.
scriptures to give you. He got all the ways to uplift you and empower you, make you feel better. That's great. I don't need that from my head coach. I need somebody who's going to dig in that tail.
You need someone with a little nasty. And sometimes some of these assistants don't have the nasty in them. And that's why they may not succeed as the
Yeah.
head coach. And that's the toughest part of the transition.
Yeah.
And that's why sometimes you need to go and be a head coach, make some mistakes at a smaller school before you step up to the big leagues. Because guess what? This is the Power Five. This is the ACC.
Okay.
This is North Carolina basketball.
Okay.
Like, you need a little bit of nasty too. And I know Roy probably has the same aura that Hubert Davis has in terms of good guy. But he had some nasty to him too.
Okay.
And I'm sure if you ask a lot of his players, they'll tell you the same thing.
If you can't throw out a dadgummit, then I already know you're probably not that guy. So it's okay. All that to say, they move on. They're probably going to venture their way into the NIT, and that's fine. Congrats for Pitt for getting a solid win. Capel probably gets another year under his belt to really grow and keep his players, and they just figure out how to do so. But I want to transition.
What my favorite,
yes, go ahead.
Quick. You know what my favorite part of this game was? The little stat tidbit that I saw that popped up on the internet was that Pitt beat Carolina so bad in this game that it is no longer a quad 4 loss because Pitt elevated to quad 3 by beating Carolina. So, Carolina losing almost helped themselves out in a way by
getting their ass whooped.
Right, exactly. By losing in the manner that they did, so that the loss isn't as bad as it really is. I find that fascinating.
So if you're not going to be challenged, do the worst part and make sure you get your ass whooped. Okay, cool. Got it. Man, I learn something new every day, and that makes me even more disappointed, but maybe not. Maybe we'll still find ourselves in the NCAA tournament.
That'll put your mind in a pretzel. Like, I don't know if that's good or not.
That's why Ken Pop, all of these stat stuff is just very stressful. But there were other games that happened on Wednesday night that we want to talk to here in just a second. Want to remind you guys that making us your first listen each and every day. We're available wherever you listen to podcasts, as well as Locked On Bets. We know that we talk about betting here. We're going to have a lot of that discussion tomorrow on tomorrow's show with Drizzy Drake for Freestyle Friday. So make sure you tap in there. This is available wherever you listen to podcasts. Notre Dame and Boston College. Man, oh man, what a good one. Notre Dame outlasted the Eagles 99-95 and went into overtime. The Eagles, as you had mentioned, are not the scrub team of our conference. You don't feel bad when you lose to them because you know you have good players. And you talk about Coach Grant and what he's done with that program the same way I used to talk about Coach Forbes in last season. The tides are turning. I feel like the Eagles are going to be a team you pay attention to going into 2022-2023 season. Because of the way they are standing toe-to-toe and even beating some really good teams in our conference, it sucks to lose. You don't want to find moral victories, but at the same time, you hold your head up to a Notre Dame team currently sitting at 19-7, and they're really trying to make their way into this dancing in March.
Yeah, first place in the ACC, tied with Duke right now for Notre Dame. Like, you look at going on the road and putting this team, a team that you've already beat this season, by the way, and nearly sweeping one of the top teams in the conference. Like, that's a building block for Boston College. And just looking at some of the games that they've played in lately too, like, you hung around with Duke for a little bit. You hung around with Virginia a bit as well. They just haven't had the formula for playing two halves. And that's a tough thing when you bring in a new coach and building up the culture and all that. It's tough because finishing is a really tough thing, especially against groups that, I mean, look at the last four coaches that Boston College has faced. Notre Dame, Mike Bray, veteran. Duke, need I say more? Syracuse, need I say more? Virginia, Tony Bennett. I mean, there are three national championship coaches plus Mike Bray, who's been a damn good coach in his own right as well. So that's not an easy thing to do against teams that know how to close out games and against coaches that know how to make second half adjustments. And listen, I have no doubt in my mind that Earl Grant's going to get there at a certain point. But in year one, it's a tough thing to do, especially in a place like Boston College where recruiting hasn't been strong for quite some time. Like, you're gonna see a shift as long as they can start to dominate that Northeast, not dominate, but like be a player in the Northeast in recruiting. Absolutely. You'll start to see that shift with Boston College.
Absolutely. Same way you see Blake Wesley and Notre Dame and how you kind of keep it at home. Maybe they can figure out how to keep some, really good talent up there in the Northeast to stay around and attend to Boston College. They have a decent football program. So it's a great university. So there's a lot of good selling points. And maybe you could be the guy that helps to take it to the next level so we can beat a Notre Dame or we can sweep them in the season. All of that good stuff for sure. Also want to mention Miami and Louisville 70-63 victory for the Hurricanes, now sitting at 19-7. While the Louisville Cardinals drop 11-14. Miami holding on to get a victory. And Louisville, I'm sorry, hate had to be you, but we all know it's just issues going on over there. Can't sleep on the fact that Charlie Moore and Isaiah Wong and Mr. McGusty are having really good seasons. So as much as I talk about how the ACC is eating up itself, I do feel like this ACC tournament is going to be very exciting. Something gives me very good, exciting energy.
A lot of people are talking about Alondes Williams as the best transfer in the conference, and rightfully so. He's been fantastic, a big reason why Wake Forest has played the way that it has this season. But don't sleep on Charlie Moore as maybe being the best transfer in the conference.
Okay.
Because of what he has done and the meaningful moments that he has put together too. I mean, he has the big buzzer beater to go out and who did they beat? Was it
Virginia Tech?
Yeah. The big buzzer beater there. I mean, he's just the reason why this team has overachieved at the degree that they have, is bringing stability to the point guard position. And he's just a guy who, I mean, you talk about a college basketball passport, all the different schools and stops that he's been at, whether he starts his career at Cal, then he goes to Kansas, then he goes to DePaul. Now he's at Miami. I mean, he's touched every single coast. I think he's only missing the Mountain Time Zone in there. And he's gone and played in 4 different conferences.
Yeah.
He has seen it all. And I think that's a really valuable thing to have in a point guard, and a reason why Miami might be tailored for some NCAA tournament success because of the strength they have at point guard, a coach who's a solid coach in Jim Larinaga, some nice supplementary pieces. But I think Charlie Moore is going to kind of be the cold of the engine here. And he's a guy that I would want as my point guard because of all the stuff that he's seen over the course of his career.
Absolutely. And you're playing with guys who have that want to, and they have that fire about them. And even just looking back when they put 30 on North Carolina, they enjoy being the bad guy, but they enjoy dominating teams. And I think as we get into tournament play, it's going to be essential for them to lean on a Charlie Moore and lean on some of their big shooting guards and forwards and all of that good stuff. And they also have, a strong squad overall. I think Miami is very deep. So I never want to sleep on anybody. But if you could say right now, before we wrap up the show here, is it still Notre Dame for you? Are we feeling good about anybody else? Yep.
You're talking regular season?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I look at Notre Dame's remaining schedule. Let me pull it up here real quick because I saw it the other day. This is what you're looking at the rest of the way for Notre Dame before the ACC tournament. You've got a road game against Wake Forest. Then you're home against Syracuse, home against Georgia Tech, on the road against Florida State, and then home against Pitt. Maybe one loss in there.
Yeah.
Maybe one loss in there.
Yeah.
Like that is a nice little cushy way to close out your season. Meanwhile, the other teams that you're looking at, Duke, you have a couple of easy ones when you look at home against Florida State, a depleted Florida State team, a road game against Pitt, but then you're on the road against Virginia. That's not going to be easy. On the road against Syracuse, you never know what Syracuse team you're going to get. And then you're going to have the absolutely charged matchup against Carolina. Like, there are 3 potentially tough games in there for Duke.
Yeah.
And then I guess the other teams that you throw into the conversation of closing the season against in terms of who could be a competitor, Miami, Virginia, road against Pitt, home against Virginia Tech, road against BC, road against Syracuse. Like, there could be some losses lumped in there. I don't think Miami is this Teflon being. Not that I think Notre Dame is either, but the schedule for Notre Dame is the easiest the rest of the way. So I'll go with Notre Dame. I will, because I think Duke could definitely lose 1 and potentially 2. Meanwhile, Notre Dame, I think it would be a failure if you lost more than 1 down the stretch here.
Absolutely. I think for whatever reason, Duke craps the bed when they're at home, or it's too close for comfort when they're playing at home, which you would think during this season.
And you get the best shot of the opponent too. Like that's just simply what it is. And like
absolutely,
the Duke Syracuse game, that's probably going to be the largest on-campus crowd at a college basketball game all season long. So like,
Yeah.
you never know. Weird things can happen when that stuff
Weird
plays
things could
plays
happen.
out. Yeah.
Listen, it's so close to the end, but we have a lot of good things going down the stretch. Want to remind you guys that the women play tonight as well. If you want to check out the big Louisville, North Carolina game at 6 p.m. on ACC Network Extra, I think that's going to be good. Another top 25 matchup. Virginia Tech will play Syracuse, Wake Forest will play NC State, and Notre Dame will play Georgia Tech. So make sure you tap into that. Tyler, it's always a pleasure to have you here on the show. Can you please remind folks of where they can find you, follow your work?
Yeah, check us out, Locked On Syracuse, every single weekday, Monday through Friday. You can find us on Twitter at LO_Syracuse and myself at Tyler AKI_.
No doubt. Guys, come back tomorrow. Freestyle Friday. Jersey Drake in the building. For Candace Cooper and Tyler Aki. Until next time.